They are popular with the people, even hailed as mini celebrities, and voted as Singapore's 51st birthday icon. But yet, at the same time, otters have entered homes, killing prized koi and goldfish worth thousands of dollars. Not to mention humans bitten by otters. On this episode of Talking Point, I'm on the trail of these critters to find out just how much damage they've caused and if we should be taking some drastic measures to mitigate otter-human conflict.
Their bite was incredible. I mean, my leg was the first thing the otters got. Imagine a staple gun going through your skin, right? It was awful.
Over a year ago, Graham was on his usual morning walk. Nothing could have prepared him for his assailant.
The otters were walking down the path, which they probably do every day, but unfortunately this morning a runner ran into them. And as he went by me, because obviously the otters thought I was him, and then they just jumped me.
And how aggressive were these otters?
Amazingly aggressive. I'm a big guy, but that took about 2 seconds to knock me. They took me down on my leg, first of all, jumped on my back. They started biting through my shorts. Then some of the other ones started to try and bite my face. There was at least 20 bites. Yeah, there was obviously a lot of blood. So every time I tried to get up, I couldn't move.
What did it take to get the otters off?
I had my friend trying to get them off, got hold of me and dragged me up. Without him, I don't know how I would have got up.
Yeah, after seeing photos of Graham's injuries, I saw how bad they can be. And 1 year on, you can still see the scars on his legs. You know, I always thought otters were meat creatures. I didn't think they would be so aggressive. And it makes me realize maybe there's so much more that I don't know about them. This is Bernard Seah. He calls himself an ottographer. Well, that's a photographer who takes pictures of otters. And I am all geared up to meet him.
In all instances that I've seen where otters have been reported to have given a nip to a person nearby, it's always the case that pups were present. So depending on how easily triggered a pup is, it is going to call for help and it's going to make the adults react. So they will just being protective of their territory and their family members.
That is crazy because in my mind, I've always just thought of them as cute little creatures.
But they are a creature that's not to be messed with. Have you ever heard of otters going up to crocodiles in Sungai Buloh and actually disturbing them?
Oh my God! Whoa, whoa, whoa. What?
Yeah.
Oh, that's utterly brave of the otter. But why do they do that?
So being an apex predator, they're letting know the other apex predator that you're not the only apex predator in town, right? So don't mess with me and I won't mess with you.
What is deemed a threat to these otters?
One of them is humans approaching close, trying to take a picture, and then they even go closer and then they antagonize and provoke the otter. I mean, other threats could be a dog, right, that is off-leash, running around, barking, and that in turn may make the otters a bit more defensive of their family members.
Turns out the cute appearances belie how strong these otters can be. An adult otter can grow up to 1.2 meters. Has strong, dexterous paws that can grip a struggling, slippery fish. They have sharp canines too, able to easily chomp through the hard gill plates of a fish. So what are the telltale signs of an agitated otter?
If you're approaching and then one turns and looks at you and then, looks away, that, it's all right. But when you see like 4 or 5 of the 10 otters looking at you and staring at you, means you're being noticed. When you're in the presence of otters, always have like a third eye, if you will, all right, to make sure no one is near the otters, triggering the otters. Because if someone triggers the otters, and the person is fast on his or her feet and runs by you, guess who's next?
You.
Or you.
Yeah. Okay, so otters attack when they feel threatened. But what about these attacks? Pet fish ponds wiped out overnight. Imagine you have prized fishes reared for over a decade and worth thousands of dollars. Now imagine, overnight, that treasured possession is wiped out. This happened to at least 3 other families in the Bukit Timah vicinity. This fish pond right here was attacked 2 months ago by otters. Why does it seem like otters prey on these fishes?
One of the fundamental reasons is that fish is fish to otters. Unfortunately, they're not able to differentiate between a fish in a river as opposed to in a pond. And if there are fish confined in a pond, it's going to be easy prey to them. So they are opportunistic.
Is it because there's not enough fish in the wild as well?
No, I do not think that is the reason. There are cases where they are hunting for the sake of hunting, unfortunately. It's more to do with them treating it as a sport, and that is why there are often cases where the fish is caught and then partially bitten with the head taken off and then left there to rot.
But how do the otters know that there's a fish pond right here, for example?
We have been curious about as well. We think it's something to do with the smell of the fish, and also I think when you have ponds, the sound of the water splashing probably attract them.
The koi pond is actually protected by this glass panel. We measured from the glass panel down to the ground. It's about 1.2 meters. So how can the otters scale up so high?
The adult otters, if they really tried, they could probably reach, just need to jump a bit, and the front limbs can reach the edge of this glass panel. And once they do that, they can actually carry themselves over. I think we should walk around and just take a look, see what gaps there might be, to find out how the otters are coming in.
All right, let's go. How about from outside then? Is there any way for the otters to scale the wall to jump in at all?
They can't really scale walls directly unless there's objects for them to hold. We need to know what's happening on the other side, whether there's a ledge, whether there are patterns on the perimeter which might allow for the otters to climb over.
Okay. Shall we take a look at that side?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we are heading next door to the neighbor's house because we suspect that the otters managed to enter my victim's house via the neighbors. Okay, so does this look like something the otters can climb on?
Yeah, so that ledge is about 50 to 60 cm. The otters can easily climb over, and then the grills are like perfect objects for them to hold on and to prop them up over the wall.
And these gates, obviously, something that even
so
adult
these
otters
gates
can squeeze
are,
through?
it's like 15 cm, so they can literally walk through. It's not an issue.
We managed to convince the neighbor to let us in and see what sort of preventive measures can be installed. To minimize otter-human conflicts, Kalai and the ACRES team suggest putting up barriers of entry. This is a polycarbonate board. It has a slippery surface so it prevents otters from gripping on it. These are called exclusion measures because they prevent otters from entering your residential compound.
All right, Munah, so we have completed one segment of it. So this will help to deter otters from climbing on top here and eventually going into the house. We want to remind people that don't wait till you start to see otters in the neighborhood. If you have a koi pond, start putting these measures in immediately because you never know when the otters might appear and by then it may be too late.
There were definitely some challenges trying to outsmart the otters, especially if it involves your neighbor's house. And in this case, the otters managed to get into the victim's fish pond because they went through the neighbor's house. It did take us some time to convince the neighbors to allow us in. And actually, shortly after filming, we had to take down the panel as the neighbors didn't want it up since it's permanent and can be unsightly. Which is why Tham Yuen Ying isn't about to consider any exclusion measures. The total damage? 40 dead fishes, over $20,000.
So in the morning, right, my helpers and my dad, they came out and they found like parts of the fishes all outside the perimeter of the pond, and there were also some in the pond as well. Yeah, so there were bits of like bones and like part of the body and just some headless bodies. So we watched them grow up pretty much. So we had this like emotional attachment already. We see them every day, right? And suddenly they were just gone in one night, just like that. Yeah, so it was very heartbreaking.
So what happened after you found out that, you know, they were massacred? Did you report this to anyone?
Yeah, I actually wrote into NParks and asked and demanded that they do something about this problem. And yeah, so they actually came the next day. And then he gave the usual suggestions of like fencing up the pond or maybe fencing up the perimeters of the house. But then again, he also agreed that it is very impractical for our setup, yeah, to do so, and it may not work.
After speaking to the authorities, do you feel like on your part you'd be compromising too much?
Yes, because to do fencing, right, it's just really not practical for our house. And to put like glass barricades, right, around our pond, well, it's so ugly. And so it kind of defeats the purpose of like a pond, right? We want to enjoy the fish and not ruin our landscape. You're telling us to barricade ourselves from these otters. It's like as though like you're being robbed and then the robbers being allowed to run free. But then you have to barricade your house so that the robber doesn't come in. So I think that's a bit, we definitely need to tackle this problem in a more practical manner.
Otters are actually natives to Singapore and have been around for over 25 years. So why are we only hearing of otter-human conflicts in recent years? Could it be that the population of otters have ballooned out of control in Singapore? Adrian Liu, who oversees wildlife management in this city-state, has answers for me. But before that, he's giving me a wild mission.
I need you to look for something that the otters release. So that is the otter sprain.
What are otter sprains?
To put it simply, right, otter sprains are their poop and their pee.
What? This is part of my job scope. There you go, Munah. What is happening? How many gloves are there? There's only one pair. So it's just me? Why is this happening? Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! This is a mission! I cannot lose this! Okay, wait. It smells like fresh air. Unless it smells fresh. Turns out, it was not easy looking for otter sprains, or simply put, poop. Simply because otters are not everywhere, as I have assumed. I really cannot find. Okay, you know what? I cannot go home empty-handed. I'm just gonna... No, I tricked you. I put a leaf in because I didn't want to lose. But okay. No, I couldn't find any poop. Why did we need to look for the poop?
They will poop on a particular area. And that's what other otter families would detect. And this tells them that, oh, there's another family and this is their territory and they have to move out from that area. If not, they'll start fighting for territory. And in doing so, that sort of controls their population. In Singapore, they do observe these territorial fights. And these territorial fights amongst the otters can result in the death of like one or a few of their members as well. And in the wild, in nature, that keeps population numbers, down as well.
Will there ever be a time when there's too many otters for Singapore?
The carrying capacity of the habitat controls their population. So that carrying capacity basically refers to how much resources and space for the number of otters. So there is a limit to all these. Availability of food, availability of spaces for it to build its den, and also availability for it to roam around. So that limits their number. So we won't see like a runaway population growth. It will at some time plateau.
With the current number of otters, would you consider this population manageable?
I wouldn't put a number to it. We are looking at the human-wildlife conflict and also looking at how people behave on the ground. What we would define as unmanageable is when you have like a whole lot of feedback and it doesn't come down.
For some, current measures to mitigate otter-human conflicts are insufficient. So much so that there are even calls for culling.
Well, otters living here in Singapore among Singapore housing estates, they may be relocated to places with natural food sources to reduce conflict with humans.
These otters live in Seletar Hills, a residential estate dense with people and traffic. If you think moving a pack of 6 otters is an easy affair, think again. The relocation process involved 2 months of research and 3 weeks of planning and evaluation of the relocation. I'm speaking to someone who was part of the months-long relocation exercise. And for the otters' privacy, their new homes cannot be revealed. How does the team decide where the otters will go to?
So they were brought to an area where there was an empty hold without competing families, and it is within a natural area protected by MParks.
So this is not just one instance where the otters raid the koi ponds. I've read other articles saying that the otters are doing the same and there's a lot of human-otter conflict. So are there any plans to relocate the other otter families?
So where to relocate to? Oh, do I take them to Sungai Buloh? Do I take them to Mandai, Kranji, Pasir Ris, even Tanah Merah? There are resident families there. Then secondly, what about areas that are not occupied by otters, central catchment reservoirs, western catchment reservoirs? They are not suitable for otters to stay and feed. So that's why when they go there, they will leave it after a few days. Without removing the attractant, another family will turn up, right? And then thirdly, the effort of relocation, oh my goodness, 3 weeks of effort involving agencies, members of public, residents, researchers. It's a phenomenal effort to be able to do it ethically.
We've heard terrible tales about otters, but to be fair, otters do bring about benefits to our natural ecosystem. Being apex predators, they are critical creatures to aquatic habitats. By feeding on fishes in the water bodies, they allow for more fish species to be present, those who are otherwise suffocated by dominant species. But for some people, the cons outweigh the pros. Late last year, Desmond Wise started a petition calling for an end to otters roaming our urban spaces because, you guessed it, his koi pond was attacked by otters overnight. So, I have invited Desmond, as well as individuals with varying sentiments towards otters, and presenting them with some solutions to deal with our otter population to see which might be the most feasible. We're going to start with the most extreme one, and that is culling of the otters responsible for repeated otter-human conflicts. Do you think this is feasible? 4 of you have said not feasible, and 1 feasible. So we will go with not feasible. Why do you think this is not feasible, Desmond? You did start a petition to get rid of the otters as well when your fish pond was attacked.
I believe that we have to control the population of otters in Singapore, but culling them is not an option.
I saw it as a possible solution because it does manage the population. If you do cull the otters, you should be able to reduce the number of incidents.
We will now move on to our next idea, which is to create an otter sanctuary, meaning that the otters will have a large space and they will have enough access to food and spaces to roam around so that they will be separated from urbanized areas. Do you think this is feasible? All right, looks like 3 of you voted for feasible and 2 of you not feasible.
It's a good idea for them to have their own space separate from us so that we feel safe, and definitely our koi will not be eaten again. And also, I think it's safer for otters to also have their own little sanctuary, so they won't get into like traffic accidents or any other possible attacks from maybe dogs.
So for otters, there are territorial boundaries. So if you put all the otters together in one spot, it's going to end up in a bloodbath.
The next idea that I have is to have safe distancing otter guards. So these guards would then volunteer to keep watch on the otters, especially during breeding season, and ensure the safety of humans. Do you think this is feasible? Interesting. 4 not feasible and 1 feasible.
Honestly speaking, some people just don't get it, so they still want to get closer to take pictures. They just ignore the advice. And again, if you're talking about a long-term solution, we can't have people, we can't have a set of eyeballs like looking at an otter 24/7, right? I mean, the manpower, the resource, who's going to pay them, right? I mean, it is not a long-term solution.
The next idea is providing free exclusion measures for families with fish ponds.
I'm a little bit on the fence on this one. I feel that it goes slightly against the idea of coexistence, because it should not be sponsored in a sense. The base level of understanding and acceptance should come from the people who has their homes affected, and they should be the ones who want to do it.
All right, on to the next idea, which is to put up more otter signages to warn people to not get so close to the otters. Do you think this is feasible? Between the two, Timothy, not feasible. All right, so 3 of you voted not feasible and 2 of you have said feasible. All right, so Timothy, you were actually in between, but in the end you went for not feasible. Tell me why.
What we also see is that even if the signs are there, sometimes people still just ignore the signs.
Okay, and Younglin?
There's no harm to having more. The more signages we have, the more people will take note and to be able to see this.
Based on the solutions I have presented, creating an otter sanctuary received the most number of votes as a potential long-term solution. While the group was almost split when it comes to having free otter proofing and putting up more signages. Perhaps we all need to be on the same page of what coexisting with otters look like. Does it mean making compromises on our end to allow otters to roam freely, or implementing drastic measures to those who have violated our personal space? Yes, otters have left a trail of destruction in Singapore, but I for one feel there is no need to resort to measures like culling them.